Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Throwing Away Logic. And we've started bang on time for once. It's 7 p.m. here in the UK, 2 p.m. Eastern Time over stateside. And as just said, we're a weekly science, secular philosophy, all that good stuff we cover in the show, interviewing really cool guests for you. Like I said, I'll have to really rush through all the announcements tonight because we have our guest just for 1 hour, so it's a little bit a shorter show tonight. Excuse me. So, just the usual stuff. If you want to call in, as you can see, Skype contact detail is Throwing Away Logic. Just add that, send me a PM, general gist to the question. Remember, we do record all the calls and it's uploaded later, so you grant us permission to use your likeness. And as you can see, up in the corner there, the recording of this show is public domain, so feel free to share it, mirror it, whatever you do, just link back to us as a courtesy. And I'll quickly go around my panel and welcome you back, Marty. How are you doing?
I'm doing better than the last time, but
yeah. Have you recovered yet?
Yeah, I'm pretty much fine.
Okay, and welcoming back Sheila. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Cal. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick introduction to our guest. He's written 2 very neat books. The first one was Disproving Christianity and Other Secular Writings, and the second one was Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist. And he has done a degree in religious studies. So everyone, please welcome David G. McAfee. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me.
All right, no problem. And as always, like I say, as it's a shorter show tonight, we'll just get stuck straight in. So, Sheila, as always, you're good with the introductory questions, so take it away.
All right, fantastic. Why don't we just go ahead and start at the beginning? Why don't you give us a little bit of background? For example, have you always been an atheist? How exactly did you get to the point where you are now?
Yep. Because I wrote the book, Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, The Guide to Coming Out as a Non-Believer, people a lot of times ask me about that, whether or not I have some great coming out story. Believe it or not, I was never religious. I did grow up in a religious family, a Christian family to be specific. My grandparents and my parents were Christian and went to church. As a kid, though, I just didn't take it seriously, and I think I was about 13 years old before I realized that they did take it seriously. And before then, I kind of just saw it as a pastime, and I was interested in it. I really did enjoy learning about the Bible and about all the stories. So when I realized that my parents and everyone thought that this was all literally true, I became more interested in it, started going to church more often with friends from school, going to different churches, and then eventually that catapulted me into my career, into majoring in religious studies at UC Santa Barbara in California. And eventually led me to writing both those books. So I was never religious, and in my book, Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, because of that, I culled together a bunch of testimonials from non-believers who came out to their family, who did have those issues with their family members, and so I put those stories in the book as well. I published 6 testimonials from other non-believers.
Okay.
Excellent. Fantastic.
So we'll quickly introduce Kitch. Welcome back, Kitch.
Hey, how's everyone?
Going grand. So Sheila, you can take over again.
No problem. All right. I guess you've been doing a lot of talks and stuff about this. Do you have any plans for any big upcoming events or speeches that you're looking forward to?
My next big event is in August, and it's in Oklahoma. It's Free OK. It's a humanist convention in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's, I'm not sure the date, but it's mid to late August, and it's supposed to be really great. Nathan Phelps and a bunch of other big names are going to be there, so it'll be cool.
Yeah, if I can come in with a question there. You did a religious studies degree. What's the difference between a religious studies degree and a theology degree?
It's very important. With a theology degree, you're learning about the religion, most of the time here, Christianity, from that religion's perspective. You're learning about what they believe happened, but you're learning about it as though it did happen. With religious studies, you look at the origins of religion, at comparing various religions. You do a lot of comparative structure. You look at religion from a phenomenological, from a naturalistic approach. And then you analyze how the different religions interacted with one another, how they got to where they are today. It's extremely factually based, so there's no conjecture. It's basically anthropology of ancient religions. And when you run into somebody who studies theology, you really notice the differences there. They don't look at any critical analysis of the faith. They just look at this is how it happened.
Okay, Sheila, go back to your question there.
How has your family kind of taken your coming out? I mean, you specifically, I guess, kind of geared one of your books towards your parents. How have they taken everything?
Well, like I mentioned, I was never religious, so the book wasn't directed at them so much, although the title might suggest otherwise. They have known that I was an atheist since as long as I can remember, because I've never professed any sort of faith. But my dad is still religious. Still, I would consider him a cultural Christian. That's someone who identifies as a Christian but doesn't necessarily take the time to think about the implications of that, just kind of identifies with it out of familiarity. And my mom is now a free-thinking, what she would consider non-believer or an agnostic atheist, just like myself. And that's after years of being a Jehovah's Witness and a Baptist Christian. So there's definitely been progress there. Both of them and my grandparents and everybody else in my family hugely supports everything that I do. So I couldn't be happier. When I do give my talks, I always show a picture of me and my parents, my arm around them and stuff. It really shows that if you do it the right way, it doesn't have to be such a divisive topic.
Have you kind of had any sort of issue with not necessarily the family, but the community that you live in? I mean, have you had any kind of, outside of the normal trolls, have you had any sort of real slingback from it?
I have mostly extended family and people who I would have considered acquaintances in high school, for instance, who definitely have reached out to me and said some negative things. But in my work, I really try to promote, instead of making fun of religion or insulting other people because they believe, I really focus on skepticism and critical thinking, which I think draws people away from religion. So although I'm doing something they see as negative, it's hard to make an argument against it, because if I'm just telling people to follow the evidence, it's hard to insult that position. Critical thinking is a difficult thing to insult, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Well, and it's a lot easier to get people to at least listen to your point, even if they don't agree with it, if you're not being attacking. So yeah, I can get that. Okay, I guess out of all of the stuff that you have done so far, is there anything that you haven't gotten to that you really want to?
Eventually, I would like to do an expanded book, an expanded version of Disproving Christianity, maybe a more comprehensive version. It's designed as a pocket guide toward the reputation of Christianity, and I say that in the book, but there are a lot of people who just desire a more comprehensive book. In my eyes, one solid contradiction disproves the idea of biblical inerrancy, and it makes it so anyone who believes in biblical literalism is definitely wrong after one contradiction. So I didn't feel that was necessary, but after the feedback, I feel that's one thing I'd like to do in the future. But I have so much time ahead of me and so many projects that I'm working on right now that I'm not concerned about that so much. I have 2 books in the works now, and I have a ton of topics that I'm considering, so I'll get to all of it eventually.
Yeah. I'll just raise something that's come up in the chat room, and we spoke about it briefly before we went on air. And it's kind of something I think you must get quite a bit. It says, oh, why don't you do anything about Islam? Why is it always about Christianity? So what's your response to that?
Yeah, so Christianity, the reason I focused my first book on Christianity was because other than the fact that my religious studies degree had an emphasis in Christianity and Mediterranean religions, I just am most affected by that faith. So I grew up in a Christian family. Christianity surrounded me in America and still does to this day. And so I decided to focus my first book on that reason, or on Christianity for that reason. But as I've been progressing over time, I've branched out even more. So my second book, Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, no longer deals with a specific faith, but it actually deals with all of atheism and non-faith in all religions. So it's kind of more comprehensive. Instead of going backwards and doing specific, like, disproving Buddhism, disproving Islam, instead of going backwards, I'm just promoting work that can be applied to all of those things. Okay. So by promoting skepticism and critical thinking in all walks of life, they can eventually apply that to any faith of their choice, and they don't need a specific book for that.
Yeah, just to say that with the Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, is there a big difference between like the different religions when these kids come out to their parents? Have you noticed, like, well, again, comparing Islam to, say, like, a Protestant, is there a big difference in how they react?
The big difference isn't in the faith itself, but it's generally in the culture and or the laws of the society that they live in. So in some areas, and in a lot of areas in the world, it's still unlawful, it's still illegal to be an atheist or to consider yourself an atheist. And those are largely Muslim countries that's the case, that they have heavy blasphemy laws. So for those people, it can definitely be more difficult, more involved, more comprehensive. And I have a chapter in the book called Extreme Situations that deals with stuff like that kind of cautions people that it might not even be the best decision to come out, to be public about your non-belief, depending on where you are and how accepting people around you are going to be.
Yeah. Like I say, just out of what's some of the most extreme reactions you've heard, like from feedback from the book?
A lot of people have sent me, because I wrote a book called Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, I kind of attract these type of messages, but people have sent me stories about how their parents wouldn't let them out of the house for weeks when they found out they were an atheist, and they didn't have my book, for instance. And I've heard stories about people getting kicked out entirely, under 16 years old, getting kicked out of their parents' house. And usually that's in strong, fundamental religious households. They've raised their kids to believe in that their whole lives, so it's really a shock to find out they don't believe it. But even in those super strict fundamentalist households, it can definitely be possible to mitigate those negative reactions by using the tips in the book, mostly just engaging in reasonable discussion and making sure they understand your arguments and your position. A lot of fundamentalist religious people, for instance, don't really know what atheism means. They think it means something entirely different. You worship Satan, or they could think it means any number of things. So a large part of the book is dedicated toward debunking atheist myths about atheism, to make it just an easier transition.
Okay. Like I say, we've got a chat room question, so Marty, you can take that one.
Okay. Would you consider yourself an agnostic or an atheist?
Don't know. I've never heard atheist before.
I consider myself an agnostic atheist, a person who doesn't believe in gods but doesn't claim to know one way or the other. And because I don't know one way or the other, it wouldn't make sense to believe in one. So I identify with both of those labels.
Yeah, for those who might not know, an atheist is someone who basically doesn't find God to be a coherent concept. So they don't believe in him because they don't know what there is to believe in.
Yeah, it depends on your specific definition of a deity. Even if you're taking a religious, established religion, they do have a defined deity. Christianity has an omnipresent, all-powerful creator God. You can define him in those terms and then simply say you don't find evidence to support those beliefs.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else there, Marty?
Yeah, well, not related to the chat room question, but I could go on if...
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Disproving Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
How far do you go? You mentioned the whole idea of finding contradictions in the Bible. And yeah, sure, that disproves biblical inerrancy. But depending on how far, how far the Christian is willing to go and say, well, the Bible may not be literally perfect and so on and so, they can backpedal a little. How far do you go in terms of, disproving things?
The book really is aimed at biblical literalism, so the people who do take it seriously. However, there are a lot of additional essays, especially in the back, that aren't specifically dedicated to that topic and do make compelling arguments against even more liberal forms of Christianity and other faiths. But as far as the content of the contradiction section, that's really its only goal, is to show these errors exist in the Bible, and so many people aren't even aware that they exist, and they claim that the Bible is literally true without even thinking about the fact that there are contradictions where it says that you can only live to be this age in this chapter, and then God says you can only live to be this age in this chapter, and both of those ages we've lived past them. So there's, factual things that can be disproven that, to me, make a compelling case against the faith entirely.
So it was just to go back to the reactions to your book. Have you had people who said they were really surprised at how well their parents took it?
Definitely.
Is that more common, do you think?
Yes, definitely. I think more common than not is people are surprised how well that their parents take it, especially if they take the time to talk to them rationally and, whether they know it or not, utilize tips from the book. I like the stories that I find the best, the most compelling, are those who simply just give the book to their parents and say, will you please read this? And it's hard. I don't say anything insulting in the book. I'm not attacking anyone's faith. I just put forth compelling arguments and debunk atheist myths. I have frequently asked questions in the back of the book. So these are questions that every Christian person has asked me, that, well, you can't see the wind, but you can prove it's there, so that proves that God exists, and stuff like that. So I have all those answers in the back, which, if a parent who has all those questions reads through the book, they won't really have anything to say afterward other than, okay, I accept your decision.
All right, that's cool. Kitch, do you want to come in here with anything?
Sure. When defending the literal view of the Bible, how far do you find that Christians are willing to twist what the Bible says in order to get around the inaccuracies?
Yeah, some people don't want to twist it at all. My grandparents would be good examples of people who will accept anything that's written in the Bible because it's been written in the Bible and they know that it's true. I asked my grandma, so it says here that women shouldn't be allowed to speak in church. Do you agree with this section of the Bible? And while a lot of apologists would say, well, that was specific to this culture and somehow that's acceptable back then but not acceptable now, and we've changed, instead of explaining all that, my grandma says, yep, that's what I believe. And so it varies depending on the person, but I enjoy both types of arguments. It's always fun to see how far somebody will try and stretch to make their argument. It's always interesting to see how far they'll take it.
Yeah. Just out of interest, have you ever had to deal with the Kent Hovens and the Ken Hams? Or have they had any contact with you at all about your books?
No. My only interaction with a professional believer or a figure like that would be William Lane Craig, who's not a creationist. But I did interact with him where a reader of his, a fan of his, sent in a question on his question and answer section on William Lane Craig's website. And it said that he, the reader, read Disproving Christianity and other secular writings and was having difficulty reconciling his faith after that. And William Lane Craig's response was great. It was, quit reading the secular material. Quit it. He said, avoid it entirely. And that was his advice. And then he had 4 steps. He had stop reading the material. The other 2 were very basic, like read my books, and then the 4th one was attend apologetics conferences. He really said that you should go to conferences so you could learn how to argue for your faith better. All kinds of interesting things. But the fact that he told the reader to avoid my book was great for me, especially because as a non-believer, I would never encourage a fellow atheist to avoid the Bible out of fear that its strong arguments might convince them. I want every believer, non-believer alike, to focus on studying all sorts of faiths because it only makes it more apparent that they're false.
Okay, chat room question just came through there. I haven't had a chance to put into the Skype chat. Was, how do you touch on the lack of evidence for the historicity of Jesus?
I don't specifically talk about whether or not Jesus existed as a human being. I feel as though it's largely irrelevant just because the magic version of Jesus definitely didn't exist. So whether or not there was a man or multiple men or a woman who wandered the earth around that time who made extraordinary claims, I don't really speak to that. Although there are a lot of really good biblical scholars who do, like Bart Ehrman and other people like that. In my opinion, though, it matters just as much whether or not Paul Bunyan existed, another mythical figure, just because the person who was real is so different that it wouldn't be recognizable.
Okay. So Sheila or Marty, you wanting to come in there?
Somebody had a question in the chat room. He's asking if you find no more evidence for God than you do for Bigfoot or unicorns. Why not simply come out of the closet and call yourself an atheist? He's wanting to know if you would consider yourself agnostic as far as unicorns were concerned.
I would say I'm just as agnostic about unicorns as I am about the specific deities of any named religion, whether or not Yahweh exists or Allah or anything like that. I would definitely say I'm about the same. If you're talking about a general, detached, deistic creator being, I wouldn't pretend to know whether or not that's the case, but because there's no evidence for it, then I'm not going to believe. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Okay, Marty, there's a chat room question just came through.
Yeah. Neil deGrasse Tyson said something interesting. He said that it's weird that atheists group together like a team based on the lack of believing something. Like it would be weird to group non-gold players together.
I think that's non-golf, if I remember the quote correctly.
Yeah.
What do you think about generalizing atheists or putting them into one group like a team?
They definitely don't go in one group or one team or anything, and that's readily apparent on my Facebook page and all my interactions with people. I get disagreements with atheists more than I do with believers because I speak out against all sorts of nonsense. I talk about all kinds of unproven and unprovable ideas, and as a result, I get people yelling at me from all sorts of angles. So I know that there's no... I wouldn't consider myself a part of any atheist movement or anything like that. I just don't believe in gods, but I also don't believe in a lot of other things, and I talk about those things as well. Neil deGrasse Tyson has a few problems, though, with his understanding of atheism. He seems to think that all atheists are active atheists, that they're actively disputing and refuting religions, and that they necessarily care about separation of church and state. There are many non-believers who exist. They don't believe in anything or don't believe in any deities, but they also don't care. They don't talk about it. They wouldn't be a fan of my page. They wouldn't read my books. But a lot of people, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, I've seen him make quotes that say that, to the opposite of that, that he thinks that they have some sort of active force about them. And then this quote about grouping them all together seems something along the same lines. I mean, the reason that a lot of people identify as an atheist is A, because they are, and B, because religion is such a popular force. I mean, most people are religious. So if most people played golf, the vast majority have played golf, yeah, I'm pretty sure we would call ourselves non-golf players. It's just how it works in cultures.
Yeah. Just to touch, I've heard you, like I've been watching some videos of you, and it's like you say the negative connotations, that are attached to the word atheist.
Definitely.
The reaction. I mean, what do you think can be done to kind of get rid of that bad image?
What I've been doing is using the word atheist and showing people what it means. I don't shy away from it and use other words. A lot of people will try and invent new terms or misuse existing terms as a means to escape that negative stigma, that connotation with atheism. So they'll say that they're a bright or that they're secular humanist, and while those terms might also apply, you are still an atheist if you don't believe in deities. So if you use the term as much as possible, debunk atheist myths as much as possible, which is what I try to do throughout Mom Died, I'm an Atheist, and show what it really is, I think that helps, because so many people have different beliefs, and even among atheists, there are a lot of people who think that it means something entirely different, that they think it means that there's no God, or you claim to know that there's no God, when obviously that would be a Gnostic atheist. So there are a lot of interesting terms and semantics, but talking about it and clearing up those definitions is definitely helping.
Yep. And Kutch, there's a chat room question came through there. You can read it.
Yeah. Sure. What kind of this is from 1CJB? What kind of evidence would What kind of evidence would convince you of a God? How could you tell if it was God and not an illusion?
Well, scientific evidence in accordance with the scientific method is generally what I take to believe in stuff. So deities would be more difficult than most things to prove scientifically, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be done. If a god wanted to exist, he could certainly provide proof of his existence. So I don't think it really matters what type of proof other than scientific evidence. But the fact that an all-knowing deity would know what it takes to convince me and would presumably want to if it wanted to save my burning soul or anything like that, then I think we can conclude that it would decide what type of evidence and that it has decided not to provide it.
Yeah. Okay, guys, who wants to come in here? Sheila? I'll just have a look at the chat room. What's going on in there?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I suppose, wow, I had a question for you, too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Recently, this movie's come out, God's Not Dead. Are you familiar with it?
I am indeed, yes. I haven't seen it, but I have discussed it, yes.
Yeah, what's your general opinion about, well, maybe not that movie specifically, but that type of movies?
Well, I mean, that movie is obviously a giant straw man. I think anybody could, even without watching it, can tell that it doesn't represent the non-believer's argument as well as it should or could. Instead, it represents the argument of somebody who hates or has disdain for what they think is God, or simply believes that, like the title suggests, that God is dead. Unfortunately, they kind of ran with that title without realizing that anything isn't dead. I mean, any idea, sure, the idea of God is alive and well today, and I will freely admit that, but because it was never alive, it can't be dead either. I mean, it just seems, like I said, a huge straw man and not really an intellectual endeavor at all, probably just for box office hits.
Yeah, I think one thing that really bothers me about it is just the dishonesty of not even trying to portray atheists fairly in any way, and having this idea of, the guy who pretends to be an atheist because he hates God and blah, blah, blah. You know.
But they did try to portray atheists fairly. There'd really be no point of making a movie.
Yeah,
exactly.
I really liked the poster that I saw for that movie, where they chose the best quote from the presumably what they thought was the best quote from the movie, and put it on this huge poster that I've seen going all over the web that says, well, atheists say that you can't disprove God, or that you can't prove God exists. And I agree, but I submit to them that you can't disprove God either. And that's like their huge revolution of a moment. So I made a meme of that. I actually just took their poster and took out God and wrote werewolves. Werewolves. You can't prove that werewolves aren't real, but I submit to you, you can't disprove them. And posted that online just to show that with any mythical figure, you can't disprove it and you can't prove it. It's just the nature of myths.
So I just want to go back to, like, when you said your studies, and you said, like, you compared all the religions historically. How much similarity is there between all of them?
There's a lot of similarity. There's similarities that come just from the fact that they are our ancestors' attempts to explain the unknown. So because our ancestors, even though they're separated by vast spaces, they were able to come up with similar ideas because we have similar ways of thinking. They invented water gods and sky gods and stuff like that because they were explaining the water and the sky and the sun. So they're similar in those ways, but they're also, and what I find more interesting, is similar because they touched, like Christianity near Zoroastrianism. You can definitely identify a number of overlapping features in both religions. You can identify from which religion they originated and how they transitioned, mostly along trade paths and stuff like that. So those interferences are really interesting to me.
Yep. There's a question just came through there. I'll ask her. Have you looked into the construction and the manipulation of the Bible through history? And if so, what did you find?
I do talk about that in Disproving Christianity. I assume that means just how the Bible has been shaped and changed over time. Yeah. If you look at what the Bible is compared to what it was pre-canonization, it's incredibly different. I do talk about the Council of Nicaea and how the Bible was first compiled and how they took out some of the more extreme ideas that they felt that didn't fit in with their faith. They thought that those ones were no longer divine. So they took out stories, they're called now forgotten gospels. They took out gospels that were part of the text, and they simply decided these ones are no longer divine. They had stories about a 30-foot cross rising from the grave, from Jesus's grave, and talking, a physical cross talking. So forgotten gospels with stuff like that. Some kind of homoerotic scenes with Jesus that I've talked about as well. So there are a lot of forgotten gospels that people forget that originally made up the Bible, and over time it's been shaped and changed and edited, even though within the text itself it says specifically don't do this, or you'll die. God will take out a page of your life if you take out a page of this book, is what it says.
Yep. I've heard this quite a lot, and there's people saying, if you read the Bible, it's possible to see that Jesus was gay. Is there any weight to that, or is that just a joke that people are making?
I think it's more of a joke than anything else, and I've entertained that. I've written about it before, not as a joke, but as a just an idea, a possibility based on that forgotten gospel. I don't think there's any evidence, like we've talked about in the past, no hard evidence to suggest that Jesus Christ existed in any way at all. So to then speculate as to what his sexual orientation would have been and other things like that, I'm not into that type of speculation.
Okay, there's a big, long question that just came in. Who wants to read it out? Because we do have a caller lined up, so I'm going to sort out the caller. I think, Kitch, I'll go with you. You can read that one out.
Sure. This is from Mechanic 1C. I was talking to my friend the other day, a Muslim, and after some discussion, he said that he prefers to be religious because it feels better than thinking that there is no God and no afterlife. What do you think about people who want to be religious because it comforts them? Would you encourage those people to lose their faith or learn about the reasons why religion has no evidence?
I feel as though, I do acknowledge that some people think that they are helped by religion. Some people are helped by religion, and some people aren't, but they think that they are. They think that their life couldn't be better without it, and then they lose it and find out that they're even better off. They don't have those false beliefs going on, and so there are a lot of interesting aspects to that as well. In general, I think that by promoting critical thinking and skepticism and evidence-based thinking, people might be tempted to throw away their faith, but that's not my fault. I'm not knocking on their doors and forcing them to read my books. I'm just putting the information out there, and if they have a skeptical mind, they can pick it up and read it, and if they don't, then they can't, and that's fine with me.
All right, cool. And so we'll just go to the caller. Ryan, are you there? Ryan? We're waiting for you, Ryan.
Oh, do you hear me now?
Yeah, that's it. We've got you now.
Yeah.
So you're on with Dave, so just ask your question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask him, for you, as a popular, skeptic and secular public speaker, what is your opinion of other contemporary public speakers, like with you, people like Dawkins, Harris, and Dennett? Do you think is there anything wrong that you think they're doing, or do you? I think what I'm really trying to ask for is are there any main disagreements that you have with contemporary atheist and skeptic speakers?
I would say I have differences of opinion and just in general with many of the popular skeptic and atheist speakers, but I don't disrespect or insult them or in any way. I think earlier we talked about Neil deGrasse Tyson and his misconception about atheism. So that's one area where I've had a public disagreement, and I haven't received an input from Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I did send him a tweet just saying that not all atheists are activists and some don't care to discuss it at all, and he hasn't gotten back to me. But I would be interested to hear those thoughts. And as far as other speakers are concerned and writers are concerned, they do a really good job at what they do. And as someone who has a religious studies degree, I just felt like I would have something to offer in addition to all the great things that they've offered. Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, those people have all done great work, and they all have their specific fields. You have science and philosophy and other areas of life, but I majored in religious studies, and I think that does make me a little bit differently qualified to speak about the various faiths and how they interacted in the past.
All right. I guess the other thing I just wanted to bring up, you guys were talking earlier about God's Not Dead. In case, I'm pretty sure you guys might already know this, there is another like big propaganda film coming out. It's called A Matter of Faith. It's basically a creationist propaganda film that it basically does the exact same thing. From their trailer, they completely make a straw man of every evolutionary biologist.
I had not heard of that, but that does sound interesting. I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, they just released the trailer this week, wasn't it, I think?
The studio has actually been DMCAing quite a few YouTubers who've made responses to their trailer.
Yeah, that's nothing unusual, that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ryan, do you have anything else?
No, that was pretty much it. Thanks for letting me on.
Thank you very much, because we do have another caller, and like I say, it's a shortened show tonight, so thanks very much for the call, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Yeah.
Ooh, sorry, I cut him off halfway. I'm very sorry there. I didn't mean. Like I say, I'll just let one of you guys ask a question while I get the next caller in.
Okay, I've got one. As you were talking about the other mainstream speakers, do you think some of the stuff that they're doing might be kind of setting us back a little bit?
Do you have anything specific, like any?
No, just I don't necessarily have anything specific for it, but I know
I don't think that I could be set back by anything that they were to do, because like I said before, I'm not part of an atheist movement and I'm not associated with them directly. So when they say things that Richard Dawkins would be a good example. He said that he was mildly molested as a child and that he wasn't bothered by it, or some variation of that, and people jumped all over him for that and tried to push those ideas onto me. But I'm not. I mean, I've never been mildly molested. I'm not going to speak to that. So, I mean, we're different people, and I don't think that their actions or their words really do affect me, but it does give interesting things to talk about, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it certainly does. I guess I'd just, we had talked kind of briefly about, trying to reach people through, I guess, sort of less aggressive means. It just kind of, it seemed to me that maybe attacking or going on the offensive was kind of the wrong way to go about it. I just kind of curious as to what your opinion was.
I completely agree, and there are believers who have only had interactions with those non-believers, with those types of non-believers, so as a result they kind of think that we are all like that, and they share that same idea as applied to all of us, and that does hurt me in that they have those assumptions coming into it. But what I work to do is to dispel those assumptions as quickly as possible and show them that I'm not attacking them. I'm merely asking for evidence. If they can provide it, that's great. If they can't provide it, then bye.
Right.
Okay, welcome the next caller, Bod to Bits. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So you're on with Dave, so ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Dave. I had a quick chat with Sheila. I just wanted to press you a little bit on this agnostic atheism. I classify myself as an atheist, and I don't consider that an absolute term because, rational skeptics, we don't deal in absolutes. That we leave that to the creationists. We understand Munchausen's trilemma and that there is a circularity, but we have to accept basal assumptions. You equated it to your belief in unicorns. Now, I can't accept that you hold any hope out that somebody's going to discover a unicorn one day.
You don't think it's possible that there's a planet somewhere in the universe, in one of the many possible universes that exist, that consists solely of unicorns? I mean, it's entirely possible that that's the case.
On Earth, do you believe that there are are you agnostic about the possibility of unicorns existing on Earth, either now or in its history?
I would compare my level of agnosticism to the intellectually honest level of, like you said, I don't speak in absolutes, so I would not say I'm absolutely certain that they don't exist because I don't speak in absolutes. I'm just as agnostic as I am about the specific deities put forth by the specific religion. So I don't think that it's possible, it's probable that unicorns or Yahweh exists, but I'm intellectually honest, and I don't, like you said, more along the lines of I don't speak in absolutes, so I wouldn't disregard that completely.
Okay, I appreciate the answer. I suppose the corollary to that is, do you think that declaring yourself as an agnostic atheist gives leverage to believers by saying that you're, in their mind, are you therefore sitting on the fence? Whereas if you were just to declare yourself as a pure atheist, you would remove that doubt from their minds.
Definitely not. I think people see atheism as an absolute position, as often they see it as someone declaring, I know that there isn't a God. And so by using that qualifier, I honestly think it's a pretty useless qualifier, because we are all, whether or not we claim to be or otherwise, we are all in fact agnostic about a particular, especially about a particular deistic detached deity. So because we're all agnostic, it seems like a useless thing, but it really is important, because there are so many people who think atheism is the firm position. There definitely are no deities, and I am in personal knowledge of that. So I use that qualifier for a reason, and that's to debunk that typical myth about atheism.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to think hard on that and decide whether I should adjust my
Thank
thoughts.
you.
But thank you.
Okay, you got anything else, Walter Bits?
No, thanks for having me on.
No problem. Always a pleasure.
Thanks,
Okay, just to let everyone know, there's 20 minutes left in the show if you want to get your questions in. Okay, was one question, it was like the title of your first book. A lot, when I've spoken to people, a lot of people think, whoa, that's a bit much to claim that you're going to disprove all of Christianity. Did you have any reservations about using that title yourself, or?
Definitely not. I think most people understand what titles are about, what book covers are about, and how they're supposed to convey the information. If you even did a cursory reading, I mean, even the preface of the book, I specifically say what I will do and what I won't do. This book will not disprove the existence of a God. It won't do a lot of things. It will look at critical analysis of the belief system. It will analyze past how Christianity was formed in the beginning and how it is practiced now, and the contradictions between that, as well as contradictions in Scripture itself. So I'm very clear about what I do, but titles of books, titles of anything are really supposed to be attention-grabbing, and as I said before, one contradiction does in fact disprove biblical inerrancy. So I don't think it's too lofty of a title at all.
Okay. All right, guys, do you want to come in there with a question? I'll check what's happening in the chat room.
I think most of it's been covered.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just what was the real kind of motivation for writing the second book? Was it just your experience with your parents, or was it kind of letters you'd gotten from other people saying, I wish I knew how to go about explaining this properly?
Yep, it's actually pretty interesting, because the reason I wrote Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist had nothing to do with my parents or nothing to do with my family at all, or anyone's family really. I received my bachelor's degree, my English and religious studies degrees, both from UC Santa Barbara. And when I graduated from the religious studies program, I applied to their master's program so I could continue my education, get my MA and my PhD. Before I submitted an application, I had a meeting with the Dean of Admissions, she Googled my name while I was sitting there, and I saw on her screen it pop up with my Amazon book page and my self-published book at the time. It was called Disproving Christianity, Refuting the World's Most Followed Religion. And she, having come from a theology program and not a religious studies program, her previous job, I suppose she didn't really know how to handle that. And instead of handling it like a secular school administrator should have, she said that I wouldn't fit in with their department's milieu because I'm an atheist activist with an axe to grind. And so when I heard that, I was just shocked, and I asked her, I said, well, Christian missionaries would definitely be considered Christian activists. They go to other countries, they spread their message, and they try to get others to be converted. And all I did was write a book, and somehow I'm excluded from this program that everybody else is allowed to go in. She continued with that stance, and eventually I wrote about it on my blog and got a lot of support, and the vice chancellor of student affairs ended up writing me an apology letter, which was really nice. I published all that in the book, the story and the apology letter, in Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist. But it was when I realized that coming out as an atheist meant more than just talking to your family. It means talking to people in public realm, in your educational field, anywhere where you want to be open about your non-belief. And so that's what actually caused me to write the book, was dealing with it in other worlds other than familial interaction. So I do focus on that in the book. I talk about how public non-belief applies to more than just family interactions. It really applies to a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay, there's a question that's come in there. Who shall I pick on to read it out? Kitch, you can read that. This question just came in there from Lady K1.
Okay, from Lady K1. So what are your thoughts on Scientology?
I'm actually I have published an interview with Jamie DeWolf, who's the great-grandson of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. And so I have put my thoughts on that online. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a religion like any other. It is interesting that it arose in the modern era, so it has modern ideas like aliens and spaceships and stuff like that. So I do find it to be a really interesting one, and one of my upcoming books, I'm going to have the Jamie DeWolf interview published in there, as well as some information about my personal visits to a Scientology center. They gave me an IQ test and gave me their reading, and they said that I was severely depressed and in need of their treatments, of course.
Yeah.
And you could tell when filling out their questionnaires that they're trying to groom people who have that cult acceptability mentality. They ask questions like, do you have a problem following authority? If somebody knows more than you, will you happily listen to them? Stuff like that in the questionnaires. So I did very poorly on that section because of the fact that they're looking for those answers, and I'm not that type of person. But I did well in their actual IQ section, which was interesting. So they didn't try to push much on me, I guess, because I failed their cult acceptability section. So in one of my next books, it's going to really outline that whole system, that whole process, as well as have my interview with Jamie DeWolf, which is available on my website if you go to davidgmcafee.com.
Right.
Jamie DeWolf interview.
Just in general, what's been your experience with cults? Have you researched them much, or?
I have, for this new book, I'm also doing a chapter on the Westboro Baptist Church. The chapter is called Westboro Baptist Cult. And I've interviewed a current member of Westboro Baptist Church as well as a former member of Westboro Baptist Church who were brothers. And I interacted with both of them, and it's been a really interesting experience kind of delving into their realm and dealing with their drama of their family and stuff. And it's really interesting to learn about how it's shaped by that specific family as opposed to a larger cult like Scientology, which has its own figureheads now. I mean, this is really still family-based, so it's an interesting one.
Just out of interest, what was the actual interview with a Westboro Baptist Church member like? I mean, are they quite approachable and amiable at first, or...?
Not nice. I mean, they aren't expected to be nice, and they're not expecting you to be nice. The interview is also available on my website and on YouTube. David G. McAfee interviews Westboro Baptist Church member, and I wouldn't say he was amiable, but they know their stuff. I mean, these are people who have been studying the Bible in and out and have been doing this in and out their entire lives. It's not like... it was pretty funny to watch some people who didn't know very much about religion but just had an inherent hatred for the Westboro Baptist Church who would come up to approach them on the picket line, and then the person on the street, the citizen, just gets destroyed in an argument because they don't know anything about the religion and the people do. And they're like, well, no, it says in the Bible here, God hates this homosexual man, not this person. So this is, I'm correct. And it's funny because they are very right. I mean, if you look at a fundamentalist view of their faith, they follow it very well. They mention the fact that Jesus flipped over tables and chased people with whips and stuff, and they don't do anything that he wouldn't have done. They say they don't hurt anybody. They aren't bombing anybody. They aren't They're just fighting for what they think is right, which is a Calvinistic approach to their religion.
Yeah. And just around, what do you think is going to happen to them now that Fred Phelps has passed away?
My thought is that it'll continue along its same vein. I think it's big enough now that it's kind of taken on a life of its own, even though it began with him. I think that they will continue, that family will continue bringing others in and having more family members and getting more media attention and doing all that.
Well, I don't know much, but how big are they exactly? Is it just the family, or...?
It's a couple families, like 3 or 4 families total, but they're so intermingled in their little area that it's really tough to separate them. But it's still relatively small, and most of their people are born into it. So if you're born into that family, then you're a part of the faith. But they don't take very many outsiders. You have to do a lot to prove yourself if you're an outsider.
Yeah, and like I said, just on the subject of cults, is there any other cults you've looked at in the new book?
Those are the 2 that I'm discussing in my most recent book, but I've done some cursory research into other ones, like cults that existed before, like suicide cults and stuff like that. I just find them very interesting because the differences between a cult and a mainstream faith are so minimal. It's just the amount of time and the number of followers really that separates them. It's really interesting to me.
Okay, we're coming up for 10 minutes left in the show, so I say chat room, if you are wanting to get your questions in, you have to get them in fast. And I say, just guys, have you got any questions at the moment?
Yeah, there was actually a question from the chat room. I'm gonna modify it a little bit because it was about YouTube specifically, but I'm gonna ask it like this. Is there anything you think atheists are doing that's counterproductive?
It's hard to say just because I don't generalize atheists in that way. I mean, there are people who do things that are counterproductive, and I think that Sheila mentioned the biggest one earlier, that's mistreatment of people, conflation of ideas with the people. So you treat a religious believer badly because they believe in the religion, and you don't treat them as a person. I've seen that type of thing happen, and it is counterproductive. But like I said, I'm not a part of a group with that person, so I hope that doesn't it doesn't reflect negatively on me.
Yeah.
Okay, Sheila or Kitch, do you want to come in there?
Well, it's kind of unfortunate that it does. I mean, a lot of time people, make assumptions about large groups just based on the minimal interactions that they have with one or two, and I think that's why, like the God Is Not Dead movie, I think that's probably a window into somebody's view about what atheists are like. I don't think it was necessarily written to be, kind of attacking. I think that's the way that someone thinks that atheists actually are, and it's just, it's no different than lumping all Christians into the same just because of a group like WBC. They're not all the same, and I think trying to do that is counterproductive for all sides.
I agree, and I think with that movie specifically, it's just interesting that there wasn't a single editor, production assistant, anybody that was like, "Hey guys, we're not really representing this this argument well."
Well, I would imagine they probably, if someone spoke up and was like, "Hey, they're not all," they probably didn't last on the phone. I'm sorry, we don't need that sort of thinking around here. But.
Okay, Kitch, do you have anything to come in with there?
I just think that atheists generally are such a varied group of people that some people are just going to act like obnoxious arseholes to Christians, and that may be where this perception is coming from the tiny minority that's acting obnoxious and holier than, ironically, holier than thou, that kind of way. I think one of us knows, at least some of us know, someone like that. So yeah, it's just mainly probably the best way to maybe argue or just discuss it calmly and politely.
And I speak out against that too. It's not like I hide in the corner when I see that type of behavior, especially on my page or anything like that happens where people aren't treating people as human beings and are treating them based on their ideas instead. I do like to point that out because I think there's a certain amount of desensitizing that goes on with non-believers. they see the religion as oppressing them, especially if you live in an area like America, where you have separation of church and state that you're supposed to have, and then religion constantly encroaching upon that separation of church and state. I can understand why people would get angry. I just can't understand why they then take that anger and apply it to human beings and not to the ideas themselves. But that's something that I try and speak out against, and something that I hope that will be slowly getting better in the future.
Just a question. Is there any resources you recommend for, like, I think a few people in the chat would be quite interested in the idea of, the history and comparison of religions. Is there any good introductory books you can recommend on the subject?
Yes. There's a book called Religious Literacy. I believe the author is Stephen Prothero, and he is an incredible author. He talks about how it's important to know about religion regardless of whether or not you're a believer. He also talks about the importance of teaching religious studies, not theology, in schools, like they do in places in Europe, but like they don't do very much in America. And I've actually written my own article on that called Why We Should Teach Religion to Children. And it specifically talks about how we should teach religion from a phenomenological approach to all kids. So really, that's my number one religious literacy book I recommend. It's called Religious Literacy.
Okay, so we're coming up for the last 5 minutes, so we'll start to wrap up. So, David, we usually give our guests a little soapbox moment. If there's any projects you want to shout out or any message in general you want to give to our audience, here's your moment. Okay, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I was happy to get the chance to talk about my current and future projects. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see my shirt or not, but it says Unconvinced by Ancient Rumors. This is one of the many shirts that I have at the Secular Store. If you just Google Secular Store or David G. McAfee Secular Store, you'll probably come up with it. And I just find that these little designs and also help us get the ideas out into the mainstream and debunk atheist myths. I mean, this is really a good analysis of how I feel. I am unconvinced by ancient rumors, and I think if people see that instead of I hate your God or something crazy like that, then they'll tend to listen better. All right. Thanks very much, David. And I'll just go around the panel for your final thoughts. So, Kitch.
Yeah, that's brilliant to have you on. It was a really good show, and thanks for taking the time to come on.
Thank you, guys.
Sheila.
Oh, I guess I too want to say thanks, David, for coming on and giving us a chance to talk to you. For everybody else, I just want to remind you that you can find me, just kind of plug myself here. You can find me on Facebook. You can also find me on A News or Twitter at Sheila Blackadder.
Okay, and Marty.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Right. That's pretty good. So I'll just quickly wrap up here. Like I said, the show will be uploaded onto YouTube at some point this weekend, and it goes up onto iTunes around Wednesday or Thursday because we send it off. We send the audio off to our editor, who's great. And I have never mentioned our editor. His name is Richard, and he goes by the name Prototype on Elance. So you can find him on there, and he's fantastic. And if you do have a podcast and you're looking for someone to do it, he is awesome. And I don't think we've ever mentioned him, but he's doing a fantastic job for us. So he deserves a little bit of credit. So well done, Richard, and keep up the good work for us, and we appreciate it very much. We're back next week, and our guest, here I go again with my Swedish pronunciation, is Patrik Lindenfors.
Something like that.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Close enough.
Yeah, so looking forward to having him. He's a professor of anthropology at Stockholm University. He's written a neat little book called God Probably Doesn't Exist. It's sort of a children's atheist fairy tale book. So he seems like a very interesting guy from the emails we've exchanged. So yeah, that'll be back same time next week. And does anyone else have any announcements?
No.
I say we've only got David for the hour, so chat room, I'll let you decide. We can do an extra half hour, just the panel here. So how shall we do it? Yeah, put thumbs up in the chat room if you want us to stay on for an extra half an hour after this, and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, big thank you to David. Like I say, check out his books. I've put links in the chat room. Like I say, no one's reacting to that. Oh, they don't even know how to do a thumbs up. Oh well, that's. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, we're getting thumbs up. So thank you very much, David. I understand you've got to run now. It's been great having you. And like I say, I'll be in touch. I'll email you all the links to the video and audio of the show. And
looking forward to it.
Yep. So thanks very much again, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for coming on. Have a good day.